You actually owned a lot of real estate and you lost it during the COVID pandemic and all that craziness. And so I was hoping you would share a little bit about that story. We're going to talk about a really traumatic event in your life, kidnapped, your husband being kidnapped, and you've written a book about this. But I think that what we can draw from your stories, your life experiences, are some amazing tools that each of us can use in our lives to get through whatever tough times. And I say tough times as if that's a light way of saying, post-traumatic stress or trauma.
Welcome to the Jennifer J. Hammond Podcast. Jennifer is a licensed realtor, educator, speaker, and best-selling author. Jennifer's goal is to help you find your yay in every day.
Hello. This is Jennifer. I've got Lorna Greyling here. As you know, I'm always interested in education, inspiration, and empowerment. So I'm so excited to have Lorna here. So welcome to the show, Lorna.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here.
It's such a pleasure to have you. You hail from South Africa and then you came over to the United States, but you actually owned a lot of real estate and you lost it during the COVID pandemic and all that craziness. And so I was hoping you would share a little bit about that story. Absolutely. But also, I want you to share a story, and I just want people who just tuned in to make sure you stay, because we're going to talk about a really traumatic, let's say event in your life, kidnapped, your husband being kidnapped, and you've written a book about this. But I think that what we can draw from your stories, your life experiences, are some amazing tools that each of us can use in our lives to get through whatever tough times. And I say tough times as if that's a light way of saying, post-traumatic stress or trauma, however you want to define that. But Lorna, let's go ahead and let's start from the beginning. You said that you own a lot of real estate and then you lost it in the middle of this COVID pandemic. Will you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I studied as a somatologist in South Africa, which is a beautician. It's a very I want to say fancy word for beauty therapist, but it's also a little bit more into the more medical side of beauty. And I started out, just opened my own salon. Then I moved to work from home and it just grew. I worked extremely hard and it evolved into one of the biggest, the biggest wellness center, day spa and aesthetic clinic in Melville. It's an area in South Africa. And after COVID hit, we lost everything. And it didn't happen quite in the beginning of COVID because, the banks, I want to say, pretended in South Africa to give us a little bit of leeway. We had 3 months that we didn't have to pay our bond. And we thought initially that it would be added onto our loan payments, give it an extra few months or whatever. But eventually they didn't do that. They actually added interest on it and we had to pay extra. So that was the one thing. My tenants at the time, I have a lot of medical tenants, psychologists, doctors. It was a whole big set up, the day spa, aesthetic clinic, and all kinds of other businesses, hair salons. They all had to be closed because it was private practices and so on. So they weren't allowed to operate in South Africa. We were in full lockdown and they lost a lot of clients. So they were unable to pay their rent. And then my husband he's a sound engineer. And he had loads of international sport productions to work on in 2020 and everything cancelled. Every last bit of work, and he was literally without work for almost 18 months until the Olympic Games was on, when he went to Japan for the Olympic Games. So 18 months of no income, businesses that weren't able to pay, added interest payments, car payments, everything just added up so badly that eventually we just couldn't pay. And we literally lost everything.
Wow.
from being a
terrible
business owner, business person, entrepreneur, model. I was a TV presenter, actress. My show that I worked on, it's on national TV. This show just closed down. They didn't even tell us. We saw it on the news. We literally, the anchor that works with me phoned me. He said, "Did you see the news?" I was like, "What? No, what news?" He said, "We just unemployed. Our show was cancelled and we don't have a job anymore."
That's horrible.
I know, right? It just all happened at the same time. And yeah, we had to move in with my parents. My family had to split up. Me and my one child moved in with my parents, and my husband with my two older children moved in with a friend of his. And moving is so traumatic. They say that moving is one of the most traumatic things that one can do. It's on the same scale as, losing a loved one, big traumatic things. They kind of put it up there in terms of PTSD and things like that. Yeah. And I have moved 15 times. I actually counted it before this interview. That's how many times I've moved in my life. And I didn't find moves that was increasing my life or advancing my life, just if I can say that, to be very traumatic. It was, things went well. It was something that you worked towards, dreamed for, and it was good. But a few times in my life, we had gone through really, really tough times in South Africa, and we had to downscale due to unforeseen circumstances. Some of it was mismanaging our money, buying too much that we couldn't afford. And when things do go wrong, you lose a little bit of business or an income or whatever the case is. Everything just falls to pieces. And others were really just bad luck, just life, right? Life that happened. And those times were definitely horrendous. So I think in the future, that's coming towards us. A lot of people might be going through these kind of circumstances where they have to downscale or where they're actually losing things. And I just want to tell them today that there is hope. That is not the end. And it's a false belief to think that that's the end of your world. It's the end of the world that you know now, but it's not the end of the world, if I can say it like that, just to put it into perspective.
Right.
And if you go through a few very, very simple steps, it sounds simple, that I did, that's what worked for me. I really believe that people can get through this very, very difficult time that might be lying ahead of us.
And I was going to say, it's interesting how you said in South Africa that you thought you were going to have this grace period. So many people in the United States have had a grace period on their personal home. However, investment properties, not so much. And I've talked to people who also, similar to you, had commercial property where they had restaurants or like medical tenants or other different tenants. And again, everything went into this virtual world. And so having commercial real estate was not something that was as needed. And so those people just stopped paying. And then we had also in the United States, we had a lot of rent moratoriums where people who were renting didn't have to pay. But unfortunately, the owner themselves was someone who was an investor and their mortgage was not suspended. So if you didn't just have a bucket of cash around, which again, most people don't have 6 months or, for this, it seems almost 2 full years that people would have needed to have extra money sitting around to pay all those mortgages. And so it's going to be a variety of different things that we're going to see, in year 2022, as we've gone through. 2020 was interesting, shall we say, so interesting, but really it just devastated a lot of people. And then 2021, there were some bright parts and some happy parts, but then it was also pretty tough because again, financially in the mortgage industry, it's different depending on whether it was a federally backed loan or if it's a privately held mortgage, or as we use the term hard money. So it just depends. So people are just turning the corner. And I think this year, 2022 is going to be the toughest for us. And it sounds like for you in South Africa, you guys got there a lot faster than we did. We've prolonged it. And again, it's not consistent depending on who backed your loan, like if our mortgages were federally backed or if it was done by a private investor. So we're just about to hit that. So all the life lessons you can help with at this point, people really need to hear what you have to say as far as, how did you talk to your children? And then you guys split your families. Your husband went with some of the children one way and you went a different way. So what kind of things, let's say what are the top 3 things that you could share that someone else could utilize as they start to face this, or if they're going through it right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing that is really, really difficult when you can see something is coming in terms of when you can lose something, and we all know it's coming. It's you're barely hanging on, and you can see, oh my gosh, life as I know it is going to end. I think the first thing that is important is that you recognize that, all right, this is going to be a loss. It is going to be a loss, and you kind of have to make that decision that, yes, it's going to be a loss. Life as I know it and as I have up to now, it's going to change. But then decide with your inner being and really just grab hold of this decision that you're making. You are going to survive this. This is not the end of the world. It really isn't, because that is the lie that kind of goes around in your head. Like, this is the end. Like, how am I going to live? And it creates this extreme fear inside of you. The fear of, like, what if this happens? What if I lose my home? What if I can't pay this? What if my kids, what if I can't feed them? What if I don't find another job? Or what if I never make this amount of money again? What if I never am able to live in a nice house like this again? Those what if questions are really the things that drives you insane, and that really makes you depressed, and it steals your hope. So in those moments, and your mind will constantly go back to that. That is normal. That is the way we were put together. It's a natural thing. I don't know why, but the human mind tends to want to run to the worst case scenario and fear. So you have to choose faith over that. You have to choose faith over fear and replace those thoughts with, yes, maybe it's not going to be the same, but what if it turns out even better, right? What if this loss is the best thing that can ever happen to our family? What if this brings us closer together? What if this terrible experience teaches my children something so valuable? If we can handle this in a good way, what if this thing that's happening to us now actually works out for good? And I think that is, I wrote a book about my husband's kidnapping, and I'm sure I'm going to write a whole lot of other books as well. But that is the profound thing about hard times, is you can use these tests and turn it into a testimony, and it can actually leave a legacy for you that can reach your grandchildren, your family, people far out there that you never knew even, and it brings hope. And that is a legacy. I think when we get older, it's the one you really want to do, no matter how much money you have, how much fame you have, is to leave that special legacy, impact people's lives. And if you use this small tool, choosing faith over fear, it really can get you there. And it will impact the way that you handle this traumatic situation in front of you. And that is something that I learned during my husband's kidnapping.
So let's talk about real quick. I was going to say, number one, you said something. I wanted to make sure that we get the takeaways. So number one, acknowledge what's happening, acknowledge the truth. Because so often I know we tended to live in denial. We joke about denial is not a river in Egypt. Denial is like this state where we just try to pretend like it's not happening to us. And then number two, try to replace the negative what ifs with positive what ifs, which I think is really important. And just really focus on the positives, which again, I think I've used the phrase, okay, that wasn't funny yet. When something happens sometimes that was not what I expected, even if it's something like as silly as just spilling an entire cup of coffee on myself or something, and you're like, but looking back on it, it could seem like a cartoon. It could seem a little bit funny. And sometimes you need a little bit of time and space between the thing that happened and being able to find the beauty in it, the thing that made it amazing or even funny, like the cup of coffee being spilled on yourself. But I think that, and so anyway, I'm sorry, I wanted to just summarize some of that because it's so important that we actually take away actionable things that we can apply in our lives. So go ahead and continue. What else can you teach?
So the third, so you're right. I'm already on 3, right?
Right.
So 1, 2, and 3. First, acknowledge. Second, choose faith in every thought that comes over your mind. And this literally, you are going to do this throughout the day, mostly every day, until it becomes more natural. After a while, it does become more natural. In the beginning, it's like, oh my gosh, what is, this is not even normal thinking because maybe the worst will happen. And it could, you know what I'm saying? The worst could happen. But in having faith that the best could come from this, gives you strength to get through this transition period. So you can either handle this with strength or you can be defeated through it. There's 2 ways that you're going to go through it. What is going to happen is going to happen. There's literally nothing you can do about that. But that's why it is such a big thing. But how you handle it depends on what is going on in your mind. Are you choosing to have faith or are you choosing to succumb to the fear? And then the third thing that is really, really profound is a simple thing. It's forgiveness. Forgiveness sets you free. There's no way that you'll be able to get through a very traumatic and difficult time without getting quiet, thinking about what is happening and who along the line brought you here. Is it the government? Is it the COVID virus? Is it someone that really made a bad decision in your life and now you are stuck with the consequences? Or is it yourself? A lot of the times, especially if it's fathers and they have families and they can see the trauma of their families, they are so unforgiving of themselves. And forgiveness is extremely important because that will make you better and not bitter. Because if you are bitter throughout this traumatic process, it will never, you will never get through it. It will cause bitterness in your life. You will, it's like another bad virus that you actually allowing into your life. And forgiveness is also consisting out of 3 steps. You have to forgive the person or the entity or the if it's a job that you've lost or whatever it is, you have to forgive them. You have to release them. So for me, it's almost like I picture this person or company or entity in a jail cell, if I can say that, to make it really practically. And then I literally open the doors of the jail and I let them out of my heart. And I'm like, you know what, I forgive you. Because life will happen to this person as well. It's not you can't control their lives through unforgiveness. It will just impact your own life. Really, it's like drinking poison and thinking someone else will die.
I know, I love that. That's
what unforgiveness does, right?
Yeah, that's Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee said that as one of his quotes as well. But I know we're just about out of time, and I want to make sure that you actually, in 2 minutes or less, and I know that's a hard amount, but can you share a little bit about your husband's kidnapping? Because I know we mentioned it, but it's pretty traumatic. So would you share a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. So my husband was kidnapped, tortured, and held for ransom while he was on a work assignment. And during this time, they would take off his clothes, take a flat side of a machete, which is like a big steel blade, and they would beat him and torture him with this while they were phoning me. So I would listen to the torturings. I would listen to him screaming and begging for his life. They would be pretending to cut off his head and his arms and numerous other things. And then they would shoot and kill the phone. And I wouldn't know whether he was dead or alive. And this went on for several days and, more than 10 days, actually. And this is what, I wrote a book on this, Kidnapped, because throughout this traumatic circumstance in our life, because I was practicing these 3 steps that I've just shared, we were able to conquer this traumatic experience. I grew my business bigger than it ever was after this traumatic circumstances. And I had so much success. I became an international award-winning model. I made world history through events that I held. My business was excelling. So many good things came after that event because I was able to go through these steps and get healing. Yeah. But if not, I probably wouldn't have been better off. And there was another time in my life when we lost our home due to other circumstances. It was a bad business deal and friends that did us in financially. And I didn't practice these steps that I knew how. And you know what? It turned so badly for me. I became so depressed and I couldn't understand what is wrong with me and how did I get here and how am I going to get out of this? Until I actually read my own book again and remembered the things that I did throughout that traumatic circumstance. And I started to implement it. And now, I mean, it's just incredible where my life is going now. So I just want to encourage everybody, that is going through a difficult time, that there is hope. It feels hopeless at the time, but don't succumb to that fear and that hopelessness. You can choose differently.
Go ahead. We're just out of time. So go ahead and make sure you tell people where they can get your book. And if you have a website, social media, anything you'd like to share.
Sure. Yes. My book is on Amazon. It's called Kidnapped, A True Story by Lorna Greyling. And I also have a website, www.lorna with an R, L-O-R-N-A, Greyling. It's like the color gray and then Ling.com. And all my information is on there if you want to book me as a speaker or whatever. So I'm there.
Thank you. And I appreciate your message of hope because we all need that message of hope. And as you know, I love to always end every one of my episodes with lifting your voice and saying yay. So will you say yay with me?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.